Christina Marie Riggs, a name that sends chills down the spine, was a licensed practical nurse who committed an unthinkable act in 1997. In a small apartment in Sherwood, Arkansas, she murdered her two young children, 5-year-old Justin Dalton Thomas and 2-year-old Shelby Alexis Riggs, before attempting to take her own life. Her crime shocked a nation, not just for the brutality, but for the haunting question: how could a mother kill her own babies? In this documentary, we dive deep into the twisted psyche of Christina Riggs, dissecting her life, her choices, and her crimes through the lens of psychology and psychoanalysis to uncover the dark forces that drove her to commit these horrific acts. Why focus on Christina Marie Riggs? Her case isn't just another true crime story. It's a psychological abyss, a rare and chilling glimpse into a mind unraveled by despair, trauma, and delusion. What makes her crime so compelling for psychological analysis is the sheer contradiction. A nurse, trained to save lives, turned executioner of her own flesh and blood. The brutality was raw, calculated, and deeply personal. Picture this. On November 4th, 1997, in a dimly lit apartment, Riggs sedated her children with antidepressants, injected her son Justin with undiluted potassium chloride, a chemical used in lethal injections, watching him writhe in agony as it burned through his veins. When it didn't kill him, she smothered him with a pillow, his cries of "Mama" echoing in her ears. Then, she turned to little Shelby, suffocating her without hesitation. Finally, she tried to end her own life with a cocktail of pills and a self-inflicted injection, collapsing in a haze of guilt and failure. This wasn't random violence. It was a mother's warped act of mercy, a descent into darkness that demands we explore the fractured mind behind it. To understand Christina Riggs, we have to start at the beginning, peeling back the layers of a life marred by pain. Born on September 2nd, 1971, in Lawton, Oklahoma, Christina's childhood was a crucible of trauma. Psychoanalytically, early experiences shaped the psyche, and Christina's were a perfect storm. She claimed she was sexually abused by her stepbrother and a neighbor as a young girl, experiences that likely planted seeds of shame, worthlessness, and distrust. In psychoanalytic terms, this trauma could have disrupted her ego development, leaving her with a fragile sense of self, prone to internalizing pain rather than seeking help. By age 14, she was drinking, smoking cigarettes, and using marijuana, a classic coping mechanism for unresolved trauma, what psychologists call self-medication. These behaviors suggest an early onset of emotional dysregulation, a hallmark of borderline personality traits, where intense emotions overwhelm rational thought. Her family history adds another layer. Depression and suicide ran like a dark thread through her lineage. Her mother attempted suicide when Christina was a baby, and a relative took their own life. There were whispers of a grandmother institutionalized for mental health issues. From a psychological perspective, this suggests a genetic predisposition to mood disorders, possibly major depressive disorder or bipolar tendencies, compounded by an environment that normalized despair. Christina's adolescence was a downward spiral. She got pregnant at 16 and gave the child up for adoption, a decision that likely deepened her sense of loss and failure. By her early 20s, she was a single mother to Justin, born in 1992, abandoned by his father. Her marriage to John Riggs in 1993 offered a flicker of hope, but it crumbled after miscarriage and domestic violence, leaving her with another child, Shelby, born in 1994. As a single mother working grueling 12-hour shifts as a nurse, earning just $17,000 a year, Christina was drowning in financial and emotional strain. Psychologically, this chronic stress likely exacerbated her underlying depression, pushing her toward a breaking point. By 1997, Christina's life was a pressure cooker. She was a single mom, barely scraping by, facing jail time for writing bad checks, and struggling to secure child support. Her low self-esteem, rooted in childhood trauma and compounded by a poor self-image due to weight issues, left her feeling like a failure. Psychologists would point to this as a classic case of learned helplessness, where repeated setbacks convince someone they're powerless to change their circumstances. But there was more, a deeper, darker shift in her psyche. Christina claimed she suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after working as a nurse near the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. She said she tended to victims, though hospital records dispute this, noting she was off duty that day. Whether true or not, this claim suggests a need to anchor her pain to a larger tragedy, a form of psychological displacement where she projected her internal chaos onto an external event. Her defense team argued she was in the grip of severe depression, possibly with psychotic features. In psychoanalytic terms, this could manifest as a distorted reality where her children's deaths seemed like an act of love. She believed killing them would spare them a life of abandonment and pain after her own suicide, a delusion rooted in what psychologists call altruistic filicide, where a parent kills their child believing it's in their best interest. This wasn't rage or hatred. It was a warped maternal instinct, twisted by a mind that saw no other way out. Her choice of victims, her own children, speaks to this. Justin and Shelby weren't random. They were extensions of her identity. Psychoanalytically, killing them was an act of self-destruction, an attempt to erase the parts of herself she felt had failed. The method of Christina's crimes is where the horror truly takes shape. On that fateful night in November 1997, she planned meticulously, like a nurse preparing for a procedure. She obtained antidepressants from a pharmacy and stole potassium chloride and morphine from her hospital. Tools of her trade turned into weapons. Picture the scene: a quiet apartment, the kids tucked into bed, unaware of the nightmare unfolding. She gave them Elavil to sedate them, then injected Justin with undiluted potassium chloride, expecting a peaceful death. Instead, he woke up screaming, "Mama, Mama," as the chemical burned through his veins. A police report later described the scene: Justin's small body, contorted in pain, his face frozen in terror. Unable to watch his suffering, Christina injected morphine, but it didn't work. In a panic, she grabbed a pillow and smothered him, pressing down until his cries stopped. Then, she turned to Shelby, sparing her the injection but not the suffocation, ending her life with the same pillow. The coroner's report was chilling. Cause of death: suffocation and drug overdose. The brutality wasn't in rage, but in the cold, clinical precision of a nurse who knew exactly how to kill. Why this method? Psychologically, it reflects her need for control. Potassium chloride, used in executions, promised a quick, humane death, aligning with her delusion of mercy. When it failed, smothering became a desperate fallback, an intimate act that forced her to confront the reality of her actions. In psychoanalytic terms, this shift from injection to suffocation mirrors a breakdown in her defense mechanisms. Her attempt to distance herself from the act crumbled, forcing her to physically engage in the killing. Her subsequent suicide attempt, 28 Elavil pills and a potassium chloride injection, shows a fragmented ego, torn between guilt and self-preservation. She collapsed unconscious, leaving a suicide note that read, "I can't live like this anymore, and I couldn't bear to leave my children behind to be a burden." What drove Christina to this point? Let's break it down like a profiler would. First, her history of trauma and depression points to a likely diagnosis of major depressive disorder with possible psychotic features. The psychotic element is key. Her belief that killing her children was an act of love suggests a break from reality, a hallmark of psychosis. Second, her childhood abuse and family history of mental illness suggests a genetic and environmental predisposition to mood disorders. Psychoanalytically, her actions could stem from an unresolved Oedipal conflict, where her early trauma distorted her ability to form healthy attachments, leading to a pathological need to protect her children by destroying them. Third, her social isolation and financial stress created a pressure cooker that amplified her despair. Psychologists like Mayanette Lane, who corresponded with Riggs, noted her guilt-ridden days in prison, suggesting a borderline personality trait, intense remorse coupled with impulsivity. Her choice of victims, her own children, reflect a phenomenon called family annihilation, where a parent kills their entire family unit, often tied to a sense of ownership or control. In Christina's case, her children were extensions of her identity, and killing them was a way to erase her perceived failures as a mother. The prosecution's claim that she saw her kids as an inconvenience oversimplifies it. Yes, she left them alone to go to karaoke bars, as prosecutor Larry Jegley pointed out, but this wasn't hatred. It was escapism, a desperate attempt to flee her overwhelming reality. Her method, using medical tools, reflects her identity as a nurse, a perversion version of her caregiving role. Psychoanalytically, this is a classic case of projection. She inflicted her pain onto her children, believing she was saving them from a world she saw as cruel. When police arrived at the Sherwood apartment, alerted by Christina's mother, they found a scene straight out of a nightmare. A small red tricycle and a radio flyer wagon sat innocently outside, contrasting the horror within. Inside, Justin and Shelby lay dead on their mother's bed, covered with a blanket, their faces pale and still. Christina was unconscious on the floor. A needle mark on her arm with a potassium chloride had burned a hole. The suicide note, addressed to her mother, revealed her twisted logic. She feared her children would be separated or grow up knowing their mother killed herself. A neighbor told police, "I heard nothing that night. No screams, no struggle, just silence." The media frenzy was immediate. The Arkansas Democrat-Gazette ran headlines like "Suffocation, Drugs Killed 2 Children," painting a picture of a cold-blooded killer. But was she? At trial in June 1998, Christina's defense argued insanity, citing her depression and alleged PTSD. Psychiatrists testified she couldn't appreciate the wrongness of her actions, a claim rooted in her psychotic delusion of mercy. Yet, the prosecution painted her as selfish, a mother who saw her kids as a burden. The jury took just 55 minutes to convict her of capital murder. When asked about the death penalty, Christina shocked the courtroom. "I want to die. I want to be with my babies." This wasn't defiance. It was surrender, a final act of self-destruction. Psychoanalytically, this reflected death drive, a Freudian concept where the psyche seeks to return to a state of nothingness, escaping unbearable pain. Christina Riggs was executed by lethal injection on May 2, 2000, at Arkansas's Cummings Unit, the first woman executed in the state since 1845. Ironically, the state used potassium chloride, the same drug she used on Justin, to end her life. Her final words were haunting. "No words can express just how sorry I am for taking the lives of my babies. Now I can be with my babies, as I always intended." She died at 9:28 p.m., her face calm, as if finally at peace. The rapid pace of her execution, less than 2 years after conviction, reflected her refusal to appeal, a choice that human rights activists called state-assisted suicide. Mayonette Lane, a psychology student who corresponded with her, said she believed she'd be with her children in death, and that comforted her. Philosophically, Christina's story forces us to confront the nature of evil and free will. Was she a monster, as the prosecution claimed, or a victim of a mind so broken it saw murder as love? Existentialist thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre might argue she was fully responsible for her choices, her bad faith leading her to embrace a delusional narrative of mercy. Yet, a psychoanalytic lens suggests her actions were less about choice and more about a psyche shattered by trauma, depression, and isolation. Her case challenges us to ask, where does personal responsibility end and mental illness begin? Christina Riggs didn't just kill her children. She killed a part of herself that could still hope, a tragic act of self-annihilation masquerading as maternal sacrifice. Her end raises deeper questions about justice and redemption. By choosing death, she sought to atone, but was it enough? Philosophers like Hannah Arendt might point to the banality of evil here, not a cartoonish villain, but an ordinary woman whose pain twisted her into something unrecognizable. Christina's story isn't just a true crime tale. It's a mirror held up to our own fragility, a reminder that the line between love and horror is terrifyingly thin. As we close this chapter, her final words echo, "I love you, my babies." A mother's love, distorted by darkness, left a nation haunted, hearts racing, and minds wrestling with the incomprehensible.